Lives while building homes for people who need them. Project Rebuild is helping young adults get their lives back on track.
And in the process, create more affordable housing. Only News 5's Kevin Berry shows us how they're having a lasting impact, making Canton a better land.
The new paint Taya Jackson is putting on this lunch table isn't the only new look she's creating. If Taya wasn't part of the 9-month Project Rebuild program,
honestly, I probably really wouldn't be doing nothing.
Both she and Corian Bonder are learning construction skills while also getting help in the classroom, setting them and their peers up for college or the workforce.
I want to work for something bigger.
Yeah, I want to go to college. I want to own my own business. I want to do construction, interior designing.
Joanna James runs the 20-year-old program and says they focus on teaching young adults the skills that make them responsible adults and good employees.
And sometimes that looks like basic life skills. It might look like financial literacy. And then other times we get into some case management type of things and help our young people create strategies to overcome some barriers they may have had.
Helping that process are mentors like Matt Fantone.
No matter how they got here, 16 to 24, that's just a confusing time in life. And I can remember thinking, you know, at that point in my life that things were challenging.
That's why Matt meets with students about once a week, helping them think about what might not always be obvious to young people.
All those things that you do, the things that you decide, the things that you think about, that all adds up into who you are.
He says he feels lucky to have had a lot of direction when he was between the ages of 16 and 24, but he knows that's not always the case for everyone.
You get to be a certain age and everyone just kind of tells you to figure it out, and that's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
While the students are getting their own lives in order, their work is also helping others.
So one of the byproducts of our construction training program is we're also creating low to moderate income housing in our community.
In the program's 20 years in Canton, students have created more than 100 housing units for low and moderate income people nearby. When students graduate, they leave with an industry-recognized credential in carpentry that can open a door to a career.
It's very positive here. You have a lot of supporters here that will help you during your journey.
What a great local news piece, shining a spotlight on the incredible work at YouthBuild in Canton, Ohio. Project Rebuild is representative of what all of us are trying to accomplish each day, week, and all year round at our own respective programs. Congratulations to Joanna, the staff of Project Rebuild, and members at the program for sharing their good work with us today. If you are just joining us, my name is Matt Fisher. I'm the Senior Director for AmeriCorps at YouthBuild USA, coming to you live from my dining room. That's right, I joined the team at YouthBuild USA 13 years ago with a background in youth programming and serving at-risk populations. There is nothing quite like YouthBuild. It is an unapologetic, comprehensive program because the need of our young people that YouthBuild is addressing is real. There are more than 38 million youth between the ages of 16 and 24 in this country. Nearly 5 million are out of school and out of work. More than 2 million of them are what are considered low income or economically disadvantaged. We know them as opportunity youth, eager to further their education, gain work experience, and help their communities. The YouthBuild program is an opportunity provider, serving over 10,000 young people annually through its more than 200 domestic programs in the United States, in addition to the more than 22 programs globally. Our students are both from urban and rural areas. Some are court involved, some are parents, and all of them are looking to make the next greatest version of themselves. YouthBuild started 42 years ago in East Harlem with a mission to provide pathways to opportunity by unleashing the intelligence and positive energy of young people to rebuild their communities and their lives with a commitment to work, education, community, and family. But most of you know this already, as you are the adult support needed to make all of this possible. You're on the front lines making the YouthBuild program a reality in your own communities. You recruit the youth, set expectations, create that safe space where they can learn and grow. You build partnerships, apply for and manage private grants, which comes with an incredible amount of strings attached to manage. And doing this is not at all easy. You wear multiple hats. It takes incredible time and effort and resources. The only thing that's generally consistent about this work is it's never consistent. Beyond the day-to-day work with our young people, administering this program is full of surprises and unexpected challenges. There's always new rules and regulations, new agendas, funder priorities, sustainability issues, partnerships, and staff turnover to manage. Then there's those challenges that you could never have pictured ourselves wrestling with. Regardless of the challenges, we need to always remember that YouthBuild is more than just a place to get an industry-recognized certification or a high school equivalency. It is and has always been more than that. It's a pit stop for many to rest, regroup, and learn. When they leave, they often move in a different direction than they had before. For others, YouthBuild can be a launching pad to propel them in the direction that they've always wanted to go, but didn't have the opportunities to get them there. How do you build the young people that come through your doors? What works at your program? What have you learned over the years, and what isn't working, and what can be improved upon? Our conference is a space for each of you to take a step back, reflect, learn from others, and evaluate how you build and create success. So thank you for being with us today. Yes, this is our first virtual YouthBuild AmeriCorps Management Conference we've ever had. And I assure you, as I've told my team for months now, this is going to be the best management conference ever. I mean, we have nothing to compare ourselves to. The bar is really low, so it's going to be the best. We have over 260 participants joining us over the next few days. You can see some of them in that chat box. Do you see them there? Hopefully you've been looking. And you can send a private message to any of them. Since we can't be in person, let them know how things are going. Ask them a question. Give them hope, hang in there. We are thrilled that you are all here, program and fiscal staff, and we're especially excited to welcome education instructors who are joining us this year for our education track. So welcome, because the success of this partnership is not just one person's responsibility, it is everyone's, no matter what your role is at your program. It takes a unified approach to make it be the best it can. And before I move any further, I want to make sure that all of you know who your trainers and staff are behind the scenes here at YouthBuild USA, who will be leading our many sessions. This is the AmeriCorps team. For many of you joining us, you actually know who these wonderful people are. For those who don't, let me offer a quick introduction. This is the program team with David, Lauren, Matt, and Mallory. They are our team of portfolio managers led by Associate Director of AmeriCorps Programming, Mallory St. Bryce, serving as your programmatic point of contact for all things AmeriCorps. So each YouthBuild program has a AmeriCorps point of contact. If you don't know who that is, you should ask your colleagues at your particular program to know who that is, because they are here to serve all of you at your site. This is our fiscal team with Johnny, newest member Anastasia, Michael, led by Associate Director of Finance, Brandon Kepper. This is a team of fiscal managers who works with each program around the submission and review of your reimbursement requests. They make sure our network is adhering to OMB requirements and supporting you all in the development of your systems to do just that. Every program that has a PM also has an FM. Hopefully you know who these people are. And last but not least is the administrative team. We have Stephen Dosh, who is our Director of Vista. Many of you work with Stephen. And we have Allison Oslin, who is our administrative manager. She has done everything behind the scenes here to make this conference go as well as it can. I am grateful to Allison and her efforts. She, all of us actually work with our funder directly. We support the team and with you all, making sure things run as smoothly as possible. So that is the AmeriCorps team. Now, this conference is the start to a new AmeriCorps grant year. And for over 25 years, the Corporation for National Community Service, which is the federal agency that oversees AmeriCorps, has been a supporter of YouthBuilds by expanding program capacity, strengthening community impact, and investing in the young people who are investing in themselves each day at the program. This year, CNCS is providing another $8.9 million to support our network of 64 programs and over 2,600 members. That's $8.9 million to support our work. Now, what that resource translates into is that over 1 million hours of service will be provided by our enrolled members the next year, service that will positively impact the community. That service will yield at least 350 units of low-income affordable housing that will be built or repaired by our members over the next year. And in addition to that $8.9 million, $4.7 million will be available in potential education awards to be earned by our young people when they fulfill their service requirements. That's money to be used for post-secondary education or job training opportunities 7 years from the completion of their service term. It really is an incredible resource that CNCS is providing our network, demonstrating their continued investment in YouthBuild and Opportunity Youth. And as we start each new grant year, we always make the time to bring staff together to talk about this work. There are actually 4 reasons you can do this at home, you can raise up 4 fingers, why we come together. And these are our main objectives. If this is not your first management conference, you're probably familiar with these images and what they represent as far as our objectives. Let's help out the new folks to see what these images represent and break this down. Our first image is this one. So one of our conference objectives is we bring folks together to connect us all to the impact on the member, program, and community. So we get in our day-to-day lives, all the paperwork, things that we're responsible for. Let's take a step back and be reminded why this work is important. And that's through our impact. Here's the second image, culture. So we want to connect programs to the importance of culture. And in fact, good culture is embedding AmeriCorps service into the YouthBuild program's DNA. So hopefully we will do that in our time together during this conference. Our next image here is this shield. So obviously this is a federal resource. Our young people are investing in themselves each and every day that they show up to our programs. And so we need to do our part and protect this resource by adhering to and following the rules and regulations associated with this federal resource. And so we'll spend some considerable time looking at that and making sure we're doing our due diligence. Last but not least, one of our last objectives is resources. There is so much to know about this partnership in such little time that we're not going to say everything there is and everything that you need to know in our time together this week. But hopefully you will access our many manuals that explain things in more detail, access our bi-monthly newsletters, access our dedicated webpage, and of course, our program and fiscal team who are a phone call away for any issue, no matter how big or small. They are here to serve you, and they are a valuable resource. The other resources, of course, you all doing this and implementing this work. So those are our 4 conference objectives that we have for you all. Now, to be frank, we'd rather be together in person. All of us are spread out over the country, and there are many, many benefits that we see when we are able to come together. In fact, our team prides itself on our management conference because we like to create an atmosphere where we can really focus on those 4 objectives and learn from each other. In addition to that, we also like to create an atmosphere where we can relax a little bit and enjoy our time away from programs because you all work hard and deserve it. I mean, the last time that our team came together with a bunch of you about it was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida in January. I mean, this was the cruel conference room we all were subjected to during our management conference. They're like, Matt, why'd you bring us down here just to look at this ocean? I said, I'm sorry, I have a mean streak in me, but I thought we would be more productive just staring at these windows. Hopefully we'll be back together sometime soon. But this is our current reality. And it isn't conducive to us coming together. So we've done our best as a team to try and meet these objectives in the virtual format. So we're going to keep calm and carry on like we are doing with everything else in our lives. For this virtual conference, we realized that we wanted to do a few things differently. So we wanted to limit our time staring at the Zoom computer. And so we're limiting things to 2 75-minute sessions a day. We're trying to have an ample break of 30 minutes in between. We're trying to keep us on task. So we're sending out text reminders to folks. A lot of you opted in during registration. If you'd like to opt in, you can text 474747, text AmeriCorps AMC to 474747 to be opted in. We gave some AmeriCorps swag before our conference. Thanks to you all for joining us for that pre-conference session. And on Wednesday, we'll have our AmeriCorps Pride Day. We also intentionally wanted to bring some expertise to our conference and asked Tamara Thompson at Mockingbird Education to speak to our audience about the current state of education for our at-risk learners at our programs and to provide some helpful strategies for us to think about when moving our member engagement to a hybrid model or remote learning. I mean, these are engagement strategies that can be used really in any format. So I'm looking forward to introducing Tamara to you all later today, hearing her keynote, and having her lead participants through our conference education track workshops tomorrow. And it wouldn't be a management conference without an optional reception. So come on down to Matt Clarico's virtual Tiki Lounge later today in this Zoom channel for Core and Trivia. Be social at a distance and enjoy a nice round of trivia. It's going to be fun. We hope to see you there. For some of you, this may be your first time listening to me and attending one of our conferences. And I want everyone to understand what this work is about in the simplest of forms. At the beginning of the YouthBuild AmeriCorps Partnership, it starts with that strong, unapologetic, comprehensive YouthBuild program looking to serve and support opportunity youth. What our programs do as an AmeriCorps site is they turn up the volume on service, making service an integral part of the program experience. From that service, you have intentionality in its implementation. And there's that focus on the impact, that service is powerful, not just on the member, but as well as on the program and community. You are dedicated to creating a program design where young people can earn an education award that can be used 7 years from their completion. And you're dedicated to integrating it within your program's culture. When you're able to pay attention to these program elements, you will often receive the following response from members about their service.
One of the steps that I've learned was service and giving back to the community.
Just giving back to the community helped me become a different person, transform my life completely.
If you don't help your community, nobody will. It will never change unless you want to make the change.
I want to clean up my town because it's not the best place to be, but I want to make it good.
It wasn't money, it was just that direct service to the community when it was building low-income housing for families in need.
There's nothing like the feeling of looking into the eyes of the person you built a house for and them thanking you for it.
I'm helping out other people and it made me feel good.
I just appreciate that. I appreciate giving back.
I started actually appreciating myself because I've never done that.
It lit something inside me, and that's what told me, you're doing something right here.
It's a real movement. The movement is real, and
it just keep rolling and rolling, and then eventually there will be a perfect community.
Impact statements like the following: AmeriCorps gave me the confidence I needed to begin acting on the issues I want to change. I did not think my voice mattered. I did not believe I was important enough to be at the table talking about issues that affect my community. I was able to turn everything I had been through into something worth living for. I never thought I would make it this far. My experience was life-changing. That's Pamela Pearl Matthews from Mile High Youth Corps, one of our alumni of the year from last year. So it is transformative. And the implementation of this work requires a lot of attention to the details. You just don't get those sort of responses overnight. And so we have our pyramid of purpose developed by portfolio manager David Weatherly. We call this the pyramid of purpose. If you've never seen this, this is our roadmap to implementation. First, you have to protect this investment. So you need to understand the rules and regulations, the paperwork that goes behind this. If our young people are investing in themselves, we need to do our part. After that, you need to focus on a program design that actually helps young people to receive that education award by making sure there's enough hour earning opportunities. Then service needs to be intentional. You need to make sure that it's meaningful, that it has a benefit to the member program and community. And when all these pieces are done right, you have this transformative member experience that is life-changing and life-lasting. And a crucial aspect to holding this all together is a strong culture of service. So this is our pyramid of purpose. In fact, last year was the start of our 3-year grant cycle. The 1920 was a new cycle. We went through a re-competition period. So when we brought you all together in person, our theme was Stronger Together. We were examining our pyramid of purpose. We actually did things like we created goals. So we examined like, how can I strengthen that member experience? How can I strengthen the impact? How can I make the Ed Award more attainable for our young people? What are my areas of weakness that I need to strengthen regarding to protecting this investment? that was the question. Where can your program improve? And we should always continue to ask ourselves that question. Last year at our conferences, we created learning partnerships. We broke you off into learning groups. A lot of you told us that was really great to get to know your colleagues better and provide them with a point of contact to ask specific questions related to this work. That was last year, and here we are jumping into 2020, and quite frankly, it hasn't been the same since Tony Stark died last summer in the Avengers Part 2 movie. Here we are in the COVID-19 world, and can you believe it? I made it this far without even saying the word COVID. Well, things are about to change here on out. So obviously, we are living it. We are, some of us are still under stay-at-home orders, or we are exercising social distancing. Obviously, that's had tremendous impacts on our lives personally, as well as our program operations. In fact, when all of this work was happening, I was grateful to our CEO at YouthBuild USA, John Valverde, who sent out this article to the staff that put labels on all the emotions that some of us were feeling. There's this great article about the discomfort you're feeling is grief from the Harvard Business Review. It's an interview with like an expert on grief, David Kessler, and just knowing these labels, denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance, were all things that I was dealing with almost on an individual day. You know, we're still experiencing in many ways. Obviously, this experience that we're all handling is impacting our program operations. And so back in March, when things started getting really heavy, you know, a lot of programs responded in different ways because the pandemic was hitting communities in different ways. So we knew programs continued to operate as normal. You know, us on the different coasts were doing things, and then in the interstates, it wasn't as big. Things have changed over time. Some programs have had to suspend operation and suspend members. Programs have had to adjust service activities. And some programs have had to make the decision to close their operations and exit their members altogether. As this landscape became a little bit understandable as to what was happening and how to best respond, I mean, it was moving so quickly, CNCS started providing information that we have slowly been circulating out to you all to benefit our program work. And in addition to that, there was the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which provided some additional flexibility related to our programming responsibilities. In the most basic terms, what we saw is CNCS allowed expanded member access to teleservice. They provided flexibility regarding member service activities with CNCS approval. The CARES Act specifically allowed members to earn a full education award who can't complete their service due to COVID-19. And then CNCS, in their authorization, were able to provide a match waiver on the regulatory match requirement for FY19 and F20 grants. Now, there's a lot of details to these specifics, so if you're just hearing them for the first time, we're going to cover them in more detail in our program and fiscal tracks, but I wanted to give you a broad understanding of what that is. So if you're like, whoa, what? Expanded service, teleservice? You got to have a conversation with your PM and your FM to understand more about it, and this will be covered in our different tracks. But unfortunately, there was a lot of things that cannot be changed because it's actually written into the regulations and is law. So despite the pandemic, the member eligibility requirements still stand, like criminal history checks. Things that would benefit our member, like counting more training hours, cannot be changed at this point. And so that 80-20 split is still in effect. So some of the regulations remain barriers, and we know about these. We have appreciated all of you who have completed our YouthBuild AmeriCorps situational reports related to this pandemic, and we have been funneling them to our CNCS portfolio manager, as well as to Voices for National Service, which is a coalition of national service programs that helps to expand national service, as well as provide policy recommendations to decision makers in Capitol Hill. It's extremely frustrating to know that we are doing the best that I can and some of these barriers are not being attended to. But we will keep this, we will be watching closely to see if any additional legislation will be beneficial to our programming efforts. And I mentioned the AmeriCorps situational report earlier. This report is really helpful to us getting a broad understanding of how this pandemic is impacting our program. So I want to thank all of you for filling this out. It's sent to one designated person at each program. It's really helpful to have this information to wrap it up. And you might not be aware, but this is what is happening across the field. First thing is that not everyone has active members. So out of our last situational report, 57 responses, 38 are still having active members, while 19 are unable to have active members at this time. Some programs have active members, but they're not actually performing service. So they're still active, but not performing service. So there's a percentage that are not able to do anything because of different barriers. Some programs are able to engage in service activities related to COVID-19, while most of us are not able to, understandably. Are members engaged in remote learning? Yes, a significant number of programs are. And a lot of programs are experiencing barriers to enrollment. So the survey has a lot more questions, and it's very helpful to understand that. But what these reports are telling us is as we wrap up our 19-20 programmatic year and enrollment, we know that we are not going to meet our enrollment targets as a network. We had worked hard really to try to do that at the beginning of the year, but that is okay. We understand the situation and the obstacle programs are facing. So if you feel that you are doing the best you can and trying to make it work, we understand that. Later on this year, we'll ask for a progress report so we can accurately report to our funder the barriers that are out there. So that's COVID-19. And that's all I want to say about that for now. More will be coming in our program and fiscal tracks. So we are going to pivot here a little bit. I've got two more pieces. I'm looking forward to the last half of our session where we have some guest presenters. The Roland T. Watkins YouthBuild AmeriCorps Impact Awards. One of the ways we try to connect our conference audience to the impact of this work is by elevating and celebrating exemplary efforts through our annual awards process. However, this year we found it very hard to raise up just a few individual programs, knowing that everyone is doing the best they can. That if suspending operations is the best thing for their members in the program, that's okay. So we are reframing this year's awards to be the Roland T. Watkins Impact Moment by listening to stories of how the YouthBuild AmeriCorps Partnership has a lasting impact on the members, the program, and/or communities. To do this, we thought we would actually use the photos submitted through our annual photo contest and take a closer look at the impact these photos show through a photo share. So I want to show you our first photo and call up our first guest speaker. Here is the photo. We wanted to hold up and learn more about it. It comes from Heart of Oregon YouthBuild in Sisters, Oregon. And I'd like to invite to the stage Kara Johnson, the program director, to tell us more about it. Kara, are you with us?
Hi, Matt. Yes, I am.
Thanks for joining us today. Tell us more about this photo and the impact on the member program and community, please.
Yeah, so 4 years ago, an empty lot was donated to the Heart of Oregon Corps from the Prineville Habitat for Humanity that was closing their chapter. The donation of the lot was based on the fact that the land would be developed into affordable housing for the rural community of Prineville, Oregon. It took our program 2 years of behind-the-scenes work to plan for the build. Teachers taught green building practices to our AmeriCorps members. They drew up plans, they brainstormed ideas for the home design, and AmeriCorps members were involved in the final drafts of the design plan for the house. The build, which is this picture right here, the wall raising, was kicked off in April of 2019, where one of our Native American youth blessed the ground in his native language. Along the way, AmeriCorps members were involved in 2 different committees. They had the Family Selection Committee and the Prineville Build Committee. Both committees provided leadership and networking opportunities to all of our youth involved. Members of these committees included the Heart of Oregon Corps board members, our staff, the young people in our program, and community volunteers. The family who ended up purchasing the home was picked in a lottery to purchase the home. They had an inspiring story as well. I'm going to call her Mrs. O. She was purchasing the home on her own for herself and her 2 children. She had left her husband the prior year because of domestic abuse. Because of the domestic abuse situation, we have to keep all of our information confidential. But due to the pandemic, the construction service for our AmeriCorps members stopped in mid-March. The good news is we were almost done with the house. The sale of the home closed in May, and officially the keys to the home were handed over at the end of May of 2020. Unfortunately, we weren't able to host a home dedication ceremony due to the stay-at-home, stay-safe orders. Instead, our YouthBuild Policy Committee decided to purchase the family a housewarming gift. The construction staff also made 2 large sister wooden keys. One was given to the family and the other is hung at our program to designate the completion of the home. After the final inspection, the home was awarded the Platinum certification through Earth Advantage as well. So it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, and the home gives a family who lives and works in the Prineville committee a new home. This project also impacted our young people in so many ways. Through the house build, we were able to recruit youth who would not have normally enrolled in our program. For our AmeriCorps members who have had the opportunity to build a home for a family in their community, this is a way for them to give back to the community that they grew up in. Our young person, Coral, said in her speech at the wall raising event, "Building this house means so much. When I was growing up, I really didn't know how I would impact the community so much until I joined YouthBuild, knowing that this is going to bring a house to people who actually need it. Building the house has brought so much out of me and all of us."
Thank you, Kara, very much for telling us more about this photo and the amazing impact that the program is having on the young people on your program and in your community. We are going to be doing similar photo shares like this on our day 2 and day 3 opening, so we'll have a couple more. I want to thank everyone who submitted photos through our photo contest that allows us to understand the amazing, impactful work that is happening in your communities. So I want to pivot this session to a final topic that has been front and center to the YouthBuild movement since its beginning in 1978, which became front and center to the collective American consciousness these last few months. The unconscionable killing of George Floyd was a stark reminder of a long history of violent acts of racism and America's undeniable history of creating systems of oppression and inequity. His death sparked the necessary protests we all bore witness to this spring and continue to happen all over the world. I would be remiss if we didn't, at a minimum, provide the space as a group to acknowledge and reflect on how acts of violence and oppression against people of color and the recent protests condemning social injustices intersects with the work and mission of YouthBuild. We plan to hear from 2 different programs whose culture has always been conscious about the social and racial identity of the young people they support and how that identity intersects with their program's approach and philosophy to prepare their young people to be active, engaged citizens and future community leaders. One of these programs developed a partnership with their local police department 15 years ago. The other consciously built a whole school community dedicated to strengthening their identity and voice. We will learn more about their approaches, the impact the recent events have had on their young people, and what advice they have for others to consider. But before we hear from them, I wanted to first invite YouthBuild USA CEO John Valverde to speak with us on this topic and provide additional context about YouthBuild as a movement and where it stands regarding issues of social justice.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Matt. And I just want to say I pray you and yours, everyone on the call today, are healthy and safe and that you're coping as best you can during these challenging times. I hope you're making time for self-care, which we've been promoting at YouthBuild USA, as I know you are people who give so much of yourselves each day. Big thank you to our YouthBuild USA AmeriCorps team, the A team. You saw their photos earlier on for everything that went into this conference. We've been working from home for 22 weeks now. So we're there with you. We're right there with you, but you are on the front lines in a way that we are not, and we're so grateful for you. So big thanks to our PMs and our FMs, getting these acronyms down, Matt, as best I can. And for all of you in attendance, I want to add how inspired I am by your courage and commitment to being a force for good in the world, despite numerous obstacles, not just the triple pandemics of racism, COVID, and the economy, but also everything that comes with that. As Matt noted, and sharing a little bit about the history of YouthBuild, for 42 years, YouthBuild has stood on the front lines addressing every social ill and challenge. Each day in the YouthBuild network and through your AmeriCorps work, you are tackling substance misuse, trauma, criminal justice issues, human trafficking, housing instability and homelessness, hunger, and strengthening service, education, and training. And we are proudly founded on youth voice and leadership as the way forward. As you may have heard before, and Matt referenced 1978, in that year, our founder asked young people in East Harlem, if you had adult support, what would you do to transform the community? And they said, we'd take back the abandoned buildings, we'd rehab them, and we'd create affordable housing for our community. Young people wanted change, and they wanted to be the change they wished to see in the world. As we saw right from the beginning in the video, they said, we're ready for something bigger. The other video profiles talked about, we're ready to give back. The impact moment photos showed how powerful young people can be in transforming their communities. Through AmeriCorps and service, young people have the opportunity to be the leaders they want to be, and perhaps were always meant to be. And you make that possible. We were on a call a couple of weeks ago with the YouthBuild National Directors Council, and one of them said, I don't think I have the energy and strength to be the next John Lewis, but I believe the next John Lewis-like social justice warrior is a current alumni or is enrolled in one of our programs and is probably contributing to service in their community. For me, it was a powerful reminder of the responsibility and privilege we all have to stand with the young leaders of today and tomorrow. At YouthBuild AmeriCorps, let us not forget the importance of the intersectionality of movements, the important role the YouthBuild movement has in all of it, and the transformative power of service. So awesome that August 12th will be Pride Day and that it'll be celebrated and that we'll be turning up the volume on service. And I want to add a personal thank you. I think many of you know my story, but were it not for good people like you, I know that I would not be here today. When I was 21 years old, sitting in a prison cell, I thought my life was over. But leaders like you believed in me more than I could believe in myself. And you set me on a path to transform my life and find meaning and purpose. It is this kind of leadership from all of you that we need today to come out the other side of this whole, stronger, and with a more just world that believes in second chances you create each day. And thinking about George Floyd, so grateful that we have time to even process this together in some way, even only briefly. As I say at almost every YouthBuild graduation at which I have spoken, for things to get better, we have to get better. For things to change, we have to change. During my 16 years in prison and the 12 years since my release, I have kept a poem by Howard Thurman on my vision board. You may know of him. He was a theologian, minister, civil rights leader, mentor to Martin Luther King Jr. I studied him when I was in seminary in prison. I want to read a short section of it. It is entitled, Keep Fresh Before Me, My Moments of High Resolve. It reads, in the quietness of this place, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of God, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in fair weather or in foul, in good times or in tempests, in the days when the darkness and the foe are nameless or familiar, I may not forget that to which my life is committed. Some people wonder at the end of their lives if they have made a difference. You don't need to worry about that. Keep fresh before you all you have already overcome, and never forget that you have a purpose and that you make a difference each day. For me, YouthBuild AmeriCorps stands for health, equity, and justice, with love, respect, and service as our foundation, our DNA, our culture, our impact, and our commitment to growing the resource. Thank you for your service on the front lines each day. Thank you for the examples you are to me, young leaders, your families, and communities. I am honored to stand with you in our shared cause for justice. Thank you. Back to you, Matt.
I appreciate it, John. Thank you for your leadership and for speaking with us all today. Before we bring up our first program to talk about their longstanding relationship with their local police department, why it started, and the impact it's had on their members and community recently, I wanted to play the following video that they put together that provides some of that context.
They come from tough neighborhoods, and their interaction with law enforcement may have not been the best. But when they are interacting with us on a weekend basis throughout the year, that changes. And here in the Fresno Police Department, my philosophy has always been in second chances. And some of these young men and women are having second chances. And what a great program, YouthBuild, under Fresno EOC Conservation Corps, that they're doing this.
I was given the opportunity to volunteer as an AmeriCorps volunteer for a whole year. It impacted me in a big way because I wasn't so fond of the police. There's a lot of people that are a little bit skeptic about them. But when I was given the opportunity to go and work on their, like next to them, it literally allowed me to see who they are. The service that we served with the police department was going out there and reaching out to the community and building this relationship between the community and the police department, and allow the community to see that there is resources, that there is help out there for them, not to just to feel like they've been left out.
They're part of a program we call the Bringing Broken Neighbors Back to Life, which is a big program. It's a community-based program with over 28 churches, over 20 community-based organizations, the Fresno Police Department. And so what we do is go into neighborhoods and to go in there and make an impact. And so they've been a key partner in that. They go in there and these young men and women who are changing their lives around are there with us.
Serving in the community in these certain neighborhoods with the police department is very great because a lot of people don't like the police or don't trust the police, you know? So to see the police come and help give into the community is a big impact on them. Us doing block parties and Santa's Village, backpack giveaways for the community, give away food.
You know, one of the things we need to do is recognize that we need more investment. We need more investment in the south end of town. And we've infused over $250,000 in Southwest Fresno and Southeast Fresno in that order because it's needed.
I had invited a couple people, you know, as we was walking, handing out the flyers, I invited somebody. And they were like, oh no, we don't deal with the police, I don't, you know. And I was like, well, you know, it's a community event, and I went to explain it to them. And then they you know, when I blocked the day of the event, they actually showed up. So I think that was a big change, you know, in their life too.
Real knows real. They're going to measure you up. And if you're not authentic, you ain't going to get no trust. You are not going to get trust. I don't care what programs we put out there. I don't care what stickers we give you. It ain't going to happen. And if they know that you're authentic in that relationship, if they know that you care about the community, you care about them, you care about the kids, it goes a long way. And that's one of the reasons why we've been so successful. We are not seeing what other major cities have seen. And a big reason is relationships. When I can have an incredible conversation with Sean Riggins, he can get a hold of me on my cell phone. When this first happened after the tragic death of George Floyd, we had protests and we had marches here. We had over 24 of them here in Fresno. And the chief appointed me to oversee it, to make sure the city didn't burn to the ground pretty much, right? But it wasn't gonna happen because I knew the heart of our community leaders. They want change, but they weren't gonna resort to that. Working nonstop with our leaders, we had probably a model on how to have a relationship with the community.
And joining us today is YouthBuild Fresno. Sean Riggins is their program director. Sean, thanks to your team for putting together that video. Wanted to invite you up to the stage to explain a little bit more about this partnership, the benefits it's provided, and how the recent events have intersected with the program, your young people and community recently.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. As Matt said, my name is Sean Riggins, and I'm the director of the Fresno EOC Local Conservation Corps, YouthBuild Fresno, located here in California. I've been with the LCC for 20 years, 10 years as director. And I can't start this without saying that as a Black man, I mourn the deaths of not only George Floyd, but Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, and proudly state that Black Lives Matter. Over the past 15 years, the Fresno Local Corps has been intentional in developing our relationship with our city's police department. And just to put this in perspective, the city of Fresno is the 6th largest city in California, and our county of Fresno has a greater population than some states. So I just want to make sure that people realize that we're not a small town like Mayberry, you know, where we can create these relationships. We're doing this in a fairly large community in California. This relationship that we've developed over the past 15 years has had a positive effect on both our students as they're able to work alongside law enforcement officers in the community, as well as officers, we believe. There's been several instances where I've had a young person who was on his way or on her way to the site and said that something happened. They were pulled over by the police and they saw their shirt, AmeriCorps and YouthBuild, and, you know, hey, you work over at the Corps, you work for YouthBuild, you know, let them on their way. That, we don't believe that would have been possible if this relationship has not been developed. And, you know, just want to go back to something that Mark said about the protests that happened back in April and March, and they're still ongoing. And he's correct. We've had those protests here in Fresno, but it has not escalated up to the point that's going on all over the country. And once again, we believe that is the byproduct of the relationship we've developed with them. And in particular, 1 week, it was about a week after everything started, and there was a letter that was circulating throughout the community. And the letter was, quote unquote, signed by Black Lives Matter, and basically was arranging for a quote unquote protests and rioting up on the north end of town. As soon as we saw this letter, we knew this thing was fake. You know, they were talking about Ruth Chris, you know, media Ruth Chris. Many of our young people don't even know who Ruth Chris is. And, you know, just other indicators that we knew this was arranged by people who were trying to start up some mess. So Black leaders, we basically contacted the police department. They were aware of the letter, and all of us showed up at the same time at the site. There were about 30 of us, Black men and Black women, and about 40 police officers. And we showed up, and, you know, to be truthful, I showed up to make sure none of my young people were going to show up, got duped by the letter, and were going to show up. So instead of causing this destruction that, you know, some people wanted to see, they basically strengthened the bonds of our relationship in this time of crisis, because you have leaders of the Black community, leaders of the Hispanic community showing up, and here we are right there alongside law enforcement. So I just want to end this on saying that, you know, everything is not perfect. We have a lot of work to do, but I think that in your communities, this may be a good time if you want to develop this relationship with law enforcement, because they are, you know, some of them are out there willing to listen now with everything that's going on. And if you need some help, I can definitely be willing to talk. I know I've talked to Captain Salazar. He would definitely be able to share his experience with law enforcement in your area. So just want to end on that. Once again, thank you. We're not perfect here, but hey, you know, we're trying. We're trying to get to a better place.
Thank you, Sean. To you, to your staff, to your comms team for putting that video together, your partnership. Thank you to Caroline Garcia, your program manager, that's been instrumental in establishing and maintaining this relationship. And thank you for telling us a little bit more about it and how your program has benefited from that relationship. We're going to shift here. I want to invite to the stage our second program, YouthBuild Philadelphia Charter School, who for many years has built a whole school community dedicated to strengthening member social identity and voice, so that their members can become more actively engaged citizens and future community leaders. Joining us today is Executive Director Scott Emerick and Director of Student Life Zuri Stone to tell us more about their work and how the recent events have impacted them, their members, and their community. Scott and Zuri, are you with us?
So thanks to Matt and the A-Team for having us and making YouthBuild Philly part of this conversation. I'm really glad and proud that this is front and center on the AmeriCorps agenda, so thank you. So Zuri and I are just going to take a few minutes to describe our social identity work at YouthBuild Philly, and we frame it as such because we want to recognize the range of identities that young people and staff and partners bring into YouthBuild in terms of race and gender, ethnicity, sexuality, religion, ability, learning differences. All those identities are coming into the building, and then we also recognize that we're prioritizing race as the identity that's most directly and consistently related to oppression in our community, with about 98% of our young people identifying as people of color and 94% of our students identifying as Black. So our social identity work group consists of myself plus 10 different staff members representing the 10 departments and about 70 staff that we have at YouthBuild Philly. And these are the 3 goals that we've set over the last almost 4 years for our social identity work. First and foremost, just having a shared language and common understanding so that when we're talking about racism and prejudice, discrimination and privilege, those are complex topics and conversations. And I think our staff, we have 3 or 4 staff on the call. I think Paul and Tanz and Zuri can all speak to the fact that a lot of those conversations aren't easy, a lot of them messy. Some have been really, really tough, but having a shared understanding, and for folks on the call, if you were to reflect on just how common the definition that you get on those types of terms would be across your program with staff and students, I think that's a really important starting place. And then making sure the second goal that those conversations are actually directly influencing the way that we establish and have relationships with young people, that the depth and authenticity of those relationships gets better when we're actually talking about race and racism and identity, that this isn't just an academic exercise, it's about staff talking with staff. And then third and finally, and I think this was really teed up by the opening videos that Matt and John talked about, this is our 28th year in YouthBuild Philly, 42 years ago in East Harlem, when Dorothy Stoneman started the movement, Leroy Looper, founding board chair, Chantel Henderson, the student that John was referencing that helped Dorothy come up with the idea of YouthBuild. It was intended not to be a program, but a movement for social justice. So the image there is a graduate at YouthBuild Philly from 4 years ago. This is her organizing in a West Philly coffee shop for working conditions and for PPE in response to COVID that she and other coffee shop workers weren't getting, but also standing in solidarity with the movement in Minneapolis in response to the police murder of George Floyd. So when I think about that image, I think to me it represents that third goal of staying grounded in the original vision of YouthBuild. And then the next slide kind of talks a little bit about what we're doing with current students. So this is part of a letter that a current YouthBuild student wrote in relationship to some work we're doing with a really great group who I'd highly recommend to anyone interested in having these conversations, called Lion Story, out of Penn, that Dr. Howard Stevenson's, actually Brian Stevenson's brother, the Equal Justice Initiative. And that work initially started about 18 months ago with our staff and with our board. And then last year we started doing that work with Lion Story with students and alumni. That work is focused on our own racial literacy. That's the ability to read, recast, and resolve racially stressful situations. And really this belief that we all have racial stories and identities, and an ask to tell your story and to help heal the village is the way that we frame that work with Lion Story. So I won't read you the entirety of the letter, but I think what's striking here for me, I think anyone at YouthBuild knows this, that students have a lot of ideas and experience and agency in conversations about race and racism. And I think this concept that she names here of not hitting the snooze button on important topics and her right to be heard on these issues, and not just to be heard, but to expect action, which is where she's closing, and which I will close on my last image that I think represents really important action for us and another one of our current students. So this is an image from the New Yorker from the early days of the Philly resistance to police violence and the murder of George Floyd. We'll recognize a mistake that we made here that we wish was a little bit different. You'll see that the AmeriCorps logo is there. So we had a conversation with Fisher and Clerico. We have in full agreement that we're not showing the logo of political activity or protest, but appreciation to both of them that recognize what I believe that's not the headline of this image. The headline from this image is that meaningful service becomes much more meaningful in the context of critical consciousness. We added critical consciousness to our mission statement at YouthBuild Philly about 1.5 years ago. And for me, in the very simplest conception of that is that young people are aware of what's going on in the world around them and are able to intervene to change it. So we all do service. There's a lot of value into young people internalizing an ethic of service. I think there's power when that service is actually paired with the idea that we're thinking about the systems and the structure that gave rise to the social inequality that shapes that service. So one of the people who's been particularly leading that movement for us is Zuri Stone, our Director of Student Life. She's been a member of our social identity work group since the very beginning. And I think what Zuri prioritizes both professionally and personally in YouthBuild spaces and beyond, and YouthBuild Philly, represents and really models a lot of who we're trying to be in this space. So I want to turn it over to Zuri.
Thank you so much, Scott. This work is really important to me, especially as a kid that grew up in Philly, right? So as I got older and graduated college and found YouthBuild, one of the things that really stuck with me about YouthBuild Philly is that we are a restorative program. And being a restorative program means that we are centered and focused on relationships, community building. I don't think you can authentically build community with students and have an appropriate educational experience if students don't see themselves in their educational spaces. And so as we developed as a community, as we developed our restorative practices, we realized that that really already aligned with the mission of YouthBuild, right? So integrating that type of practice was crucial to matching quality disciplinary processes, community building with the YouthBuild movement. And so for us being in Philadelphia, we still recognize that majority of our students are students of color, Black and brown, as Scott said. And then we also see that majority of the teachers in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia are white educators, not from the city. And so when you are trying to build a foundation of community and you have people that come from such different spaces, some of the first questions we asked ourselves were, who gets to set the rules for this community? Who gets to set the tone for this educational experience? And a lot of that takes us breaking down some of the traditional things that we're taught as educators and really challenging the systems that we're a part of, because something about those systems for us at YouthBuild Philly disengaged our students. Something about the way they supported the whole person, or something about the way the classroom was set up, or just the metrics that they were looking for did not support the Black and brown students in the city of Philadelphia. And because we see that disconnect, restorative practices is even more important to help bridge that gap. So when we had all of the protests and just all of the uprisings that happened in Philadelphia, this was not a new conversation for our students. They were not shocked for us to bring this to the table and be very upfront about it, because we've been upfront for a lot of years now. And that does not necessarily mean every day was easy, right? We also recognize and accept that we have still a fairly diverse staff, where we do have staff that are not from the city or that are not Black and brown. And even Black and brown staff still need to have this conversation and stay engaged in this conversation, and never accept the status quo. And so we've taken on that task as a staff, and we've had really open, honest conversations that, appreciating Scott's leadership that a lot of other workplaces and educational spaces wouldn't have had. And I think because we took that on as staff, and even our board joining that conversation, it was so much easier for us to have authentic conversation with students. And that shared language made it easy for us to show up and talk about things that they had already heard in social studies class, right? They had already heard it in our community and village meetings. So I say that to say, for YouthBuild Philly and just for YouthBuild in general, just remembering that this conversation should not be new. We've always been ahead of the curve as a program. We've always tried to stay innovative. And I think that making sure that our communities are as best as possible, and making sure that students that get marginalized by traditional systems always have a place at YouthBuild, especially YouthBuild Philly, is crucial. And in order to do that, you got to be ready to have the conversation head on. And so thank you guys for having us a part of this conversation. And thank you, YouthBuild, for leading with this, because starting off school years and kicking off program years, it's really important to me. Like I said, as a Philly kid, I didn't have enough staff that looked like me. I didn't have enough staff that accepted me for the community, for the person that I was, and and brought in the community that I was from into the classroom. So appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Zuri. Thank you, Scott, for talking with us about your social identities work at your program. Thank you, Sean, and to John for your remarks and telling us more about all of this intentional program work to elevate our level of civic engagement and responsibility to our young people at our program. I really appreciate the comments, hearing from you all about what Zuri, Scott, Sean, and John had to say. I mean, we could probably do a 3-day conference and more so on this topic. There's so much to think about, to talk about, and I think these conversations are incredibly important. So I wanted to at least provide a little bit of acknowledgement, and we'd be remiss if we didn't give the time and intention to acknowledge this important topic. So what I have here is our AmeriCorps pledge. And when we had this conversation or thinking about this conversation, Mallory and I, when we're putting it together, we thought about the AmeriCorps pledge, which has this, profound statement that says, I will get things done for America to make people safer, smarter, and healthier. I will bring Americans together to strengthen our communities. Faced with apathy, I will take action. Faced with conflict, I will seek common ground. Faced with adversity, I will persevere. I will carry this commitment with me this year and beyond. I am an AmeriCorps member, and I will get things done. And a lot of the services used, as Scott said, can be really powerful when that pledge is fully realized. And we need to give our young people the tools and skills to be able to lead and be those future leaders that our communities need.